So we've recently surpassed 500 uploads on this channel. It's hard to believe. Well, this is one of my favorite videos that we've ever done, maybe my favorite. It's an example of how music can really change the world. It's the story behind one of the biggest selling songs ever. And the story is told by multiple legendary artists. Such a privilege. You have to hear this tell of how in 1984, some of the greatest artists ever moved heaven and earth to create a classic #1 hit that helped so many people. It's our Christmas gift to you from Professor of Rock. Hey music junkies, Professor of Rock, always here to celebrate the greatest artists and the greatest songs of all time, and this one's an example. Make sure to subscribe below, click the bell so that you never miss out on our daily content. Also check us out on Patreon for even more content, as well as our new Vintage Years collection right up here. To celebrate the holiday season, here at Professor of Rock, in one of the most divisive times in the history of our world, we have a gift for everyone who believes that music can truly change the world. As a story, one of the biggest selling songs ever is here. The #1 smash, Do They Know It's Christmas, from my personal favorite year in music ever, 1984. Written and conceived by Bob Geldof and Midge Ure, who were able to bring together the biggest acts from Sting to Duran Duran, from Spandau Ballet to Wham, U2, Phil Collins, Boy George, so many more. I was extremely fortunate to have an in-depth conversation with co-writer Midge Ure, who conveys the truly miraculous legend behind this song and how it continues to change the world and bring people together. We also have interviews with some of the other voices on this song, and it goes all the way to Live Aid. It's really a great history. So here it is. This episode is sponsored by Zenni Eyewear. Get the latest styles at zenni.com.
Okay, then we're going to take you back to last year. In fact, the December of last year.
How did you get the call? What do you remember about Band-Aid and how that all came together?
Well, we've had time to discuss it now. And there's lots of things I don't remember. So I actually spoke to Midge and I said, how did we first meet? And he said, I don't know. I said, no, neither do I. Okay, so that's that.
It's Christmas time.
Bob saw the BBC TV reporter, Michael Burke, and he sees the famine that's going on in Ethiopia. And this was like biblical famine in the 20th century.
Yeah.
Nobody ever seen anything like this.
Paula, Bob's girlfriend, was co-hosting a music show in the north of England in Newcastle. And I was playing on the show. And I'd known Bob and Paula for a long time. And I was chatting to Paula, who was hugely pregnant. Bob was at home. Boomtown Rats were finished. He was house babysitting or whatever he was doing. And he called Paula and said, I've just seen this hideous thing. And she said, Midge is standing next to me. And she handed me the phone. And he said, look, I want to do something. I'm not in a position powerful enough to do anything. Will you help? Can we meet up when you get back? So we met up in London a couple of days later. And you have to kind of imagine this because it's really quite sad. There's two songwriters, two multi-platinum selling songwriters sitting together for 2 hours trying to figure out how we could generate income for this famine. And finally coming to the ultimate conclusion that we are absolutely useless at everything except maybe putting a good song together. So we decided to write a Christmas song, and a Christmas song specifically because this was October or something, we were talking about this.
I read it was November 5th that you guys had that lunch meeting.
Nice to hear. Thank you. I'm glad you know this stuff. So it was very tight. If you could get a #1 record in the UK charts just before Christmas, the charts freeze. So you can sell 2 or 3 times as many.
Christmas #1.
Christmas #1 always sells a lot more than any other #1. And we couldn't do a cover version of a standard Christmas song because 50% of the income goes to the songwriters. We had to write something and then donate the songwriting royalties. So I went home and wrote on my little Casio keyboard, came up with this Jingly Bells thing. And sent it to Bob on a cassette, who hated it. And then he came over
thought it sounded like the theme to Z-Cars, right?
Z-Cars, yeah. It's an old TV tune. It's nothing like that, but in Bob's head, that's what it was like. And he came to my place with a guitar. He's a left-handed guitarist, but he plays a right-handed guitar, and it was upside down. And he sang this thing at me, and every time he sang it was different. He was obviously just making this up. He had the bones of a set of lyrics, And I said, well, leave it with me and I'll try and put this together, these things, these incompatible things. And I just finished building a studio in the bottom of a garden. So I went to the studio and I spent 4 days playing all the instruments, building this thing up layer by layer, trying to get an arrangement, putting in the middle eight and, trying to get this thing to work in some kind of, order. Because it starts with the clanging chimes of doom, this dark, ominous, moody, atmospheric, sad intro. But then it has to finish with this kind of sing-along thing at the end. And again, it's a song with no chorus. The hook comes at the very end of the song.
Right.
And at that point, it's too late. You've bought the record. I don't care whether you like it or not. That's the hook at the end, And it was just an odd construction. But we figured out that if we pulled in enough talented people to come and add their strengths to it, we might get ourselves a Christmas #1. It might generate £100,000. That's the number we had in our heads.
And of course, it generated a lot more than that.
It generated a lot more than that. There was the one day in the studio that everyone saw with all the artists here. And I'm behind the mixing desk 99% of the time trying to pull this thing together. And there was a moment when, after the 24-hour period recording all the vocals, which none of the artists had heard because nobody could hear it until you walked into the studio.
Yeah.
It's something that we take for granted. You can email somebody a track and you can hear it and learn it, walk into the studio and sing your part. So they were walking in cold. So doing that, doing Phil Collins' drums and mixing the record because I had to be in the pressing plants by 8 o'clock the next morning.
And I read that Bob would keep coming in and saying, sing this part, and you'd be like, Bob, no, tell me about that.
Well, Bob's sense of melody is all over the shop. So you'd have, Boy George or somebody in there, or whoever, Tony Hadley's then there singing these things. And Bob's going, no, sing it like, it won't be snowing out because Christmas time. You'd go, what are you singing? That's not what we wrote, But there's a divide between. I was comfortable behind the desk, and Bob's brilliant at rounding people up and geeing them up and getting them doing things. But God, thank God they didn't listen to him and his direction on the vocals. I think straight after our meeting, he lived in Chelsea, so he lived near King's Road in Chelsea, and he bumped into Gary Kemp, from Spandau Ballet.
Yeah,
and then walked round the corner. He bumped into Simon Le Bon, like you do, two of the biggest artists in the UK at the time, and of course. That's where Bob starts his trickery. He's going, well, Duran have said they're doing it, so Spandau, Duran, you've got to. So all of a sudden there was a competition there. The big worry was that we hadn't actually spoken to any adults about where and when this was going to happen. So we hadn't, talked to a manager who might have written down the date and the time and the place. So on that Sunday morning or whatever it was, Bob and I are standing outside this very empty studio on a cold, wet morning without a clue who was going to turn up. Gosh. We're thinking, if I was them and I hadn't written it down, I'd have forgotten. You'd be lying in bed in Germany somewhere after a wild night out doing a TV show, whatever. And they all turned up. They all turned up.
We come from?
Yeah, we've just come from Germany.
How did you come to be in the first place? In a group?
Yeah, I'm in a group, so they invited us all along.
Such a moment, right, of music can change the world. And that was kind of the beginning of that. Like punk, I think, brought that about. I was talking to Mike Peters, The Alarm, and he said...
he's a great guy, Mike.
And he's like, people talk about negativity of punk. Punk is what brought about Live Aid and brought about all those changes.
Yeah, I think he's right. I mean, punk, it put music on a different level. It sort of gave it a different face, a different value. And I think it gave a lot of young kids a tremendous sense of hope.
Definitely.
That, blimey, if you can form a band, then so can we.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
And even coming from the working class and doing what their dad did, and their dad did is like, punk gave him that, like, we can break out.
You can do it. I mean, the going to the Band-Aid thing, I mean, that was, I think it was Steve, Gary and Martin were on the King's Road in Chelsea when they met up at Geldof. And he said, guys, I really want you to be on this record. There's a terrible tragedy going on in Ethiopia. No one even knew at the time. And so they said, yeah. And we were in Germany with the Duranis the night before. And we'd all been on the proper. I mean, serious. So we're all due to go in and do the song. And we didn't think, we thought, oh, yeah, okay, no one's going to know anything. So we've all turned up at the airport. We're all looking dreadful, And someone said, look, there's 300 screaming girls out. There's TV cameras and press and everything. So we're like, where's the nearest toilet? Get the hairspray out. John, where's the bags?
Yeah.
And then we went to the studio and Sam West, Trevor Horn's studio. And
Which you'd worked with before on
yeah.
Extinction. You asked Trevor Horn to produce it at the time, but he was booked up and he said, I'll have time in about 6 weeks. But you guys said, we've got to get it
Bob
faster
wanted
than that.
Trevor because Trevor was the hot producer at the time. He was the guy
He'd
to go
had
to.
3 #1 hits with Frankie Goes to Hollywood.
Yeah, but Trevor takes forever to make stuff. So it would have been an Easter record. And that's no good at all. It had to be done quickly. As you said, 20 days between the meeting and coming up with the idea and executing the idea. So it was short time, but he gave us 24 hours in his studio. And there's a moment in the making of video where Trevor comes in and he said, I've got this idea of doing a madrigal, a kind of, do they know, do they know, do they? All these voices all overlap. And he spent an hour doing this. And I'm sitting watching the clock going, oh my God, that's an hour I've not got left. It's an hour just been eaten up. And I had to say to Trevor, great idea, but we can't do it today. We've got to get this done,
Yeah.
So he very kindly said, oh, yeah, point taken, and stood back.
What was great was the fact that Kool and the gang had just arrived to do a tour. So they said, you can come down as well, get on the chorus. It's like there's so many people that were there.
There was a lot of people that you asked to show up, like David Bowie was supposed to sing the first line. He and Paul McCartney weren't able to move
I
their
think that was
schedules around.
more in our heads. I don't think there was ever an approach made. We just thought, wouldn't it be great to have Bowie do the opening line, because you imagine him, you can hear him singing it now, But no, he did us a big favour afterwards. He did the announcement for the first showing of the video. They gave us a 5-minute slot before Top of the Pops, which at the time was getting to like 20 million people.
Yeah.
So the BBC gave us this 5-minute slot, and we need someone with the gravitas to give this the seriousness that it needed. And nobody more powerful than Bowie, of course.
It would be wonderful if you could all buy copies of this record over the next period through Christmas. If you can't afford them, club together with somebody else to buy a copy. You know that the money will go to the Ethiopians. Thank you.
Boy George sings the last line. Tell me real quick the Boy George story.
Oh, it's funny.
There's a guy that wasn't even there.
Well, he wasn't there. And we didn't notice, and it nothing to do with George. You notice George wherever you are. But we were so frantic about trying to get all of this done. Poor old Phil Collins popping his head up every 2 hours going, are you ready for me yet? And I'm going, oh, it's another 20 minutes. And Bob noticed that he didn't see George. So he went to the drummer who was there and asked him where he was. He said, he's in New York. He said, what's he doing in New York? He said, I don't know. He must have forgotten to come. Yeah. So Bob found the hotel that he was staying in. Mm-hmm. And woke George up. He said, what's going on? He said, it's the Band-Aid record. George said, who's there? He said, every f***er beat you. He said, He said, well, I've missed it now, haven't I? He said, no, you haven't. He said, there's a Concorde. It's leaving at such and such a time. He said, get on Concorde. And he did. He got up and he bought a ticket. Nobody bought it for him. He bought a ticket and he arrived that night in the UK about 8 o'clock in the evening. And he came in and he was a bit hoarse and, a bit hungover, very George. And he stood behind the mic and he said, can someone get me a brandy? And I pressed the button in the intercom and said, you'll have to pop next door and buy one, George. I said, there's nothing here, And then he opened his mouth and he sang like an angel. In our world of plenty. But he had to be there. He couldn't not be there,
Oh, yeah. Well, Kool and the gang show up. They were a U.S. act because they're on the same label as Boomtown Rats, and they happen to be in town. But the other thing is Marilyn showed up, as I read, uninvited. Yeah. And then Neil from the Young Ones, what the heck?
Oh, that was
Which is
funny.
like when Dan Aykroyd showed up to We Are the World, which is funny. But you changed the lyric from Ethiopia to Africa because it just didn't play when you said there'll be snow.
Bob, his melody is almost as good as his timing. So, and there won't be snow in Ethiopia this Christmas. It just does not work, no matter how you try and squeeze it in. So it was too cumbersome. So we just thought, no, there won't be snow in Africa this Christmas, which of course isn't true. But Who cares? We weren't going for geographical points, you know.
It really even wasn't about the song. It was about the movement.
It wasn't the best song in the world. It was okay.
But it was the idea of bringing people together.
Sure.
They've recorded Do They Know It's Christmas, 3 other versions, which all went to #1. But just incredible that music had that power, because it kind of felt like in the 1960s, music had that power to change the world. Motown was happening, the civil rights movement, and the British invasion, the Beatles coming over after JFK had been assassinated, giving hope to America, and the UK was just opening things up, rewriting the rules about what music could be. And that kind of seemed like the 70s came in and the excess started happening a little bit, drugs and things like that, and the commercialization of music. You guys brought that back in the 80s, using music to create awareness. And that was just incredible. I want to ask you about the Bono part, because he sang that line and a lot of people didn't like that line. Tell me about that.
Well, the line is, you know, and thank God tonight it's them instead of you, which sounds brutal. But Bob wrote the line and he wanted it to be brutal. He said, no, rather it's them than you. But thank God it's them and not you. You know, just showing how close it could be. Things can turn on the toss of a coin, you know, things can change for us. We live in the Western world where we're reasonably safe and, you know, we're getting, you know, reasonably good lifestyle and whatever. And it doesn't take an awful lot to take that away, you know, for that to crumble. And we could find ourselves in the same kind of situation. No food, no prospects, no future, stuck in the middle of a civil war, you know, a war-torn country. All of that's like it could happen to anybody. And Bono said, I'm really uncomfortable singing this. You know, and Bob explained it to him and he said, okay. But when I'd sung that line with a guide vocal for everyone to hear the song, I just sung it on a lower octave, just, you know, tonight, thank God it's time instead of you. And when it came along, Bono, without being prompted, just kind of went for what felt comfortable to him.
Thank God it's them instead of you.
You know, after this discussion about the line, and we stood back and went, God, where did that come from? Because it wasn't just the power of the line. It was the feeling behind it. And it's not like when somebody had said, you've really got to scream this out. It was heartfelt. And that one line, at that key moment, turned the entire song round. Up to that part, it was droney, it was sad, it was atmospheric, it was, you know, it was kind of textural. And then all of a sudden, the whole thing just went into a whole different level. And that was just a bit of magic that happened, you know. Had it been someone else trying to sing that line, it might not have had the same effect.
Thank God it's them instead of
The power of all of you guys together singing, putting your egos at the door. And that's what's cool, is that Bob kind of came up with that, because We Are the World copied that. Quincy Jones said, put your ego at the door.
It was exactly that. You know, everyone thinks that musicians all know each other all the time. And we don't. We pass each other in the corridor of television shows, too busy sucking our cheeks in and trying to be haughty, you know, aloof. There we were in this room, someone who knew each other. Spandau and Duran obviously knew each other. There was a big rivalry going on between them. There was nothing went on. Nothing. We had no management with us. We had no record labels with us. We had nothing. There was nothing. It was an empty studio. You walked in and you did your bit. And the funny thing was, as you walk in, there's maybe a nervousness, a tension. You imagine being the first vocalist up to walk into that great big empty space with a microphone in it and a camera stuck in your face. And all of your contemporaries are all in the control room at the window, all doing that, all watching you. And it's 10 o'clock on a Sunday morning and you've got to sing. You know, that's intimidating, that's scary stuff. But by the end of the night, I had to throw them all out because they were having such a good time bonding and hanging out, because they all felt there was something special going on that day. So I find these, 30 sad souls, all with loads of money in their pocket, with London at their fingertips, right on their doorstep on a Sunday evening, and they didn't want to leave. They didn't want to go out. I had to kick them all out the studio and say, I need the quiet now to mix this.
You got to mix this thing and get it out.
This has got to be good.
And it was very British. It was very, oh, would you like a cup of tea? Oh, would you like a biscuit? You know, it's just like, you know, lunch was a chicken drumstick and a sausage roll, you know, and it was great. And I was the first one to go and sing my 2 lines, and we were all in the control room listening to the song.
Probably a little nervous.
Midge and Trevor and Bob and stuff. And, you know, Geldof, can't do the accent. Oh, go on, Hadley, get in there. Go on, you can go and do first. I went, okay. And then you got all your contemporaries in there. And anyway, so I did 2 takes and that was it.
Yeah, I mean,
next one then. So it was great, but I was bloody nervous though. You know?
Yeah.
So, but it was an amazing moment.
I know that they've definitely got the slot, the middle slot, for me, where it goes, here's to you, raise a glass for everyone.
Here's to you, raise a glass for everyone.
And I did that bit. I got there quite early as well. And then there was a lot of hanging around because everybody had to stay to film the choruses. And then they asked me back in. And I thought they'd had a discussion, like, who are we going to get to sing the first line? And eventually they decided, you know. But Midge has let me in on the fact that they did actually try other people as well. They were hedging their bets.
We let in light and vanish shade.
But I still got it. So,
you did.
So they must have gone, I'd listen to them all and go, sounds best when Paul does it, you know. So, and they chose mine.
We let in light and we vanish shade.
You're in the studio with a mic all by yourself. They're looking in, and everybody really brought their best to it.
Yeah.
Not only because of what the song meant, but also because when you got your contemporaries around, you want to let it rip.
You got to be on the money, yeah. There was a certain amount of that, and I was probably the newest star on the block at that point, so I could see Sting over by the bar where they were making coffee and stuff. Dad go over and say hello, you know, and all that stuff. But he was talking to Bono in deep conversation because they'd obviously met many times, you know. So I was a little bit, didn't know who to speak to, but I knew Tony Hadley, and the Status Quo boys are very friendly, you know, so they were looking after me, as it were.
Well, George Michael, of course, now you look back and you see him give his vocal. What do you remember about George? Of course, you've sung with George before. You sang with me and Elton when you did Every Time You Go Away.
That's right, yeah. I really liked George. I thought he was a really nice guy. He was very smart, really smart. You know, I think it takes a lot to take on the role of being a pop star. And he just managed to get into it the right amount of honesty without giving too much of yourself away. So in the end, you feel like you got nothing, you know. So I always thought I need to learn a few tricks from him, you know. And we used to bump into each other in restaurants around the place. I remember they kept the Ivy open in the UK, so we were just sat at the table talking for ages. I just found him a very interesting person. I think it did get to him in the end, you know. It's when it's hard to have your own life. It's a sad thing, but he was such a nice guy.
In the next 10 or 20 years, it's even going to mean more every year because George Michael is no longer with us. And
of
course David Bowie.
There's a few. I mean, there was talk recently, not from us, but a lot of people asking, could we get the original lineup together to go and do something as an anniversary? Which will never happen now because it's gone. You know, it's Rick Parfitt from Status Quo is gone now as well. So maybe some things are best just being left where they are. It was a magic moment in time, and it'd be a sin to kind of do a bit like if the Beatles could get back together. Would you really want to see it? Would it live up to the dreams that we've built up over the years of how wonderful it must have been? Maybe it wouldn't. So maybe it's just best left the way it actually was. But yeah, it was a fantastic thing. So
and George, his solo was great as well.
Everyone stepped up to the mark. There's not a bad performance on there. And I think it was because of that you know, the Goldfish Bowl scenario. You know, all your contemporaries are all standing there watching. They want to see what you're capable of doing. And they were all great. You know, a couple of them managed to get to my little studio beforehand and record a couple of harmonies and a couple of lines. But then once they heard the quality of everyone else, they wanted to redo their bits. It's the insecurity of the musician, you know.
Yeah,
it's the
Sting
way it
and
is.
Simon Le Bon, I read that they re-recorded theirs. And then, of course, Phil Collins, you're playing the keyboards, and Adam Clayton and Andy Taylor on the bass. But what's cool is everybody came together to make this happen. Mike Reed releases it on the radio. So you get out there, the UK magazines donated their advertising space. What I love is it sold 1 million in its first week and #1 for 5 weeks. In America, it should have been #1, but because of the way Billboard did their thing, it had to be based on airplay as well. But it sold more than the top 4 records that week. So it really was a #1 hit as far as sales go.
Sure.
And of course, it outsold Mull of Kintyre, which is Paul McCartney, and became the biggest selling UK hit of all time until Candle of the Wind 97 came out. But what was cool is the way that you and Bob stood up to Margaret Thatcher.
I have to say, this is Bob's department. I'd be useless at shouting down the UN or you know, abusing the Prime Minister as much as they need it. He's so good at it. He's brilliant. And he accosted Margaret Thatcher and said, "Why are you charging people VAT on this? Why are the government making money?" And she said in her inimitable style, "Everyone has to pay VAT, Mr. Geldof." Then took the VAT, then donated the exact same amount in aid. So they were seen to take it with one hand, but they gave it back with the other, just to keep face. But yeah, it was quite amazing.
They redid Do They Know It's Christmas Now 3 times, and I'm sure it'll happen many more times with that moment's stars and the chart toppers. And of course, singing the first line, 1989, Kylie Minogue sang the first line. 2004 it was Chris Martin of Coldplay. And then it was One Direction a few years ago. So some pretty hefty company there.
Yeah.
It's Christmas time. It's Christmas time. It's Christmas time. It's Christmas time.
I mean, this was at the moment where your star was about to shine even brighter, because every time you go away,
Every time you go away.
this record here, but what stands out to you about that session 30 plus years later? Because it inspired We Are the World and Farm Aid and Live Aid and Comic Relief and so many things.
Yeah.
Americans always copy the Brits, right? I mean, that's what I say.
but then we copy it and we bring it back. Yeah. So, and that's the way it goes. You know, it's like, I know Hamish from the Average White Band. I said, well, was it strange to be able to, you coming from Scotland and then taking the funk back to America? You know? I know. And he said, yeah, it was strange, but he said, it was wonderful at the same time. Now it's a whole different ballgame. But on the day we were doing it, we just wanted to do our best for the cause. And that was it, really, you know. And when the whole thing just went, I was going, oh my God, this is incredible. And then when they announced the concert, and that, I mean, Midge told me it was a bluff from beginning to end. They were telling one artist, oh, such and such an artist is going to be on there. You've got to be on there because they're on it. Yeah. They weren't on it. He hadn't asked them. You know, it was just bluff from start to finish. Only an Irishman could get away with that. But it was such an incredible thing, all done for the first time. And when I listen to the Band-Aid record now, I get a warmth off the record, because I think there was a lot of gravity behind what we were doing. And when I hear it now, I think it will be difficult to surpass that record, because it's got so much weight behind it, so much history behind it, you know.
It's also the rawness too, because you guys only had, I mean, talking to Midge, he had the lunch meeting on the 5th of November. You're in the studio, so they have 24 hours to get everybody in there, all these stars, leave your ego at the door kind of thing is what Bob said. But to be able to do that and mix it and put it all together, what a wave.
It was, yeah.
Excitement.
Yeah, I think, and everybody was working off that spark, you know. I mean, they probably, I think they started doing the track, they had to do the track the night before to get it ready for when the singers came in the following day, but that's such a short amount of time.
Everybody was there in great spirits. And especially that last chorus, when Bono sings his vocal, and then you're going into that end, Feed the World and Do They Know It's Christmas, like that power of all those voices.
Yeah.
That always gets me. No matter how many, and I've heard the song thousands of times, but it always gets me.
It was the last thing to go on. We had the entire song and its structure, and then the end just was a big instrumental, you know, da 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 da, just getting bigger and bigger each time. And Bob was sitting in my studio, and he said, "Look, it needs to have something people can sing, you know, like, you know, Happy Christmas, War is Over, you know, John and Yoko." Or I said, it's got to have something that you just, and between the two of us, I think he might have said the Feed the World bit, and I did the, you know, Let Them Know It's Christmas Time Again thing, and we botched this up, and it was the last thing that we did, but probably the most important thing we did, between the clanging chimes of the intro, because the moment that track starts, you know exactly what you're going to hear.
Oh, yeah.
You know, and the big sing-along at the end to give us what is now the de rigueur classic, you know, line up with all the headphones on, all singing the big chorus and Charity records.
Yeah.
That was the first one to kind of do it. So, yeah, the top and tail were the really important part, and the Bono bit in the middle.
I did make a lot of friends that day as well, so it was like a bringing together. So I made friends with John Taylor from Duran, and because we were all there on that day, it's something that we've all got in common when we meet up, you know. Yeah, it was a very special feeling.
Well, it did, as you said, it changed the world. It changed the way people looked at charity. I'm always one for, like, if you really want to change the world, become a politician. Yeah. But as a group of musicians at the time, we did help to focus the politicians around the world to a terrible tragedy. And I think from that point on, people were much more charitable. I mean, now, we have these phone-ins and all sorts of stuff where they raise money for kids and people around the world, or kids at home who are abused children, stuff like that. And that was the start of charity as we know it today. And I think it really, people talk about a load of puffy pop stars, but, I think we made a difference.
No question. Yeah. I mean, I remember when We Are the World, which actually was inspired, obviously, by that.
Yeah.
And buying that and hearing it on the radio. And then Live Aid, watching it, and just and people.
Philly, London was amazing.
Phil Collins, you guys.
And you coming back to me is against the odds. It's not just you. It's not just you.
Duran, all these bands from all walks of life. I mean, even the Beach Boys played it.
It was amazing.
It was so
Hall
cool.
& Oates.
Yeah, Hall & Oates, exactly.
And you've got to remember as well, in those days, the satellite technology wasn't nearly as good as it is today. So everyone was worried, oh God, if the cloud goes over the satellite, we're lost.
I know. And when you guys got a chance to sing it at Live Aid, that's where David Bowie did get to participate and sing his part, Paul McCartney. Tell me about that moment.
It was glorious. I mean, it's funny if you re-look at the footage. Bob, I feel uncomfortable and things like that. There were so many people vying for front position at that, because it's a major, major thing. And I was kind of edging back into the crowd, and Bob came out and grabbed my wrist and pulled me up and held my arm up. But what a magic moment to be on stage with all of those people singing that song and have 100,000 people in front of you singing it, let alone the millions upon millions, maybe billions, who saw that on television around the world singing it. It doesn't get bigger or better than that. What started as a tiny little seed of an idea grew into this massive movement and made caring okay again. It made it all right, made it kind of cool, because we used a medium that young people could understand. It was a medium that was apolitical. It was music, something that transcends borders and religions and creed and colour and all the crap that we end up finding reasons to fight over. You know, all of a sudden, we were all unified. That little room that we started this off in had grown to, you know, the planet, and everybody wanted to see a change, and that was just incredible.
Hey, thanks so much for watching. Leave us a comment on this life-changing song. Share your memories of it. I know you have them. Tell us your stories. How has music changed your life? Either this song or any of the other artists that we've interviewed here, or the songs that we've covered or that we haven't covered. We invite you to subscribe below if you like this video. Become a part of this community. It's all about keeping the music alive. We'll talk to you soon. Until next time, 3 chords and the truth, my friends.